Chapter 191. Albrol's Palace. While the palace here officially belonged to the Duke Albrol's and his family, the Dago's royal palace hadn't been moved when the nation began to increase in population. It was on the shores of Nazian Lake, and outside the city of Nazian. Once upon a time, it had been a lake retreat for the royal family, but as the branches of the royal family gained more influence, the actual monarch had been silently shuffled away from the major population centers. So, there were former royal palaces in most of the major cities at the core of Dagos. The suite that they were led to was on the ground level, with access to a large garden, overlooked by 3 other suites. Prince Alex walked out to inspect the security situation and was immediately drawn into conversation with a trio of princesses from Bostoveria. They were attending the coronation with their elder brother as a way of meeting more royals and possibly finding a suitable match. Like Signia, Bostoveria had an abundance of royals in this generation, but they were also a small and densely populated nation, so it was exceedingly difficult for them to find a proper match without making every landed nobleman a prince consort. However, as younger princesses, they didn't have any particular objection to life as a powerful prince's concubine, especially the second prince of Signia, who was known to favor his wife. That meant, even if they were given to him in a political marriage, he would be unlikely to make life difficult for them as they idled away their days. That attitude of unambitious satisfaction was anathema to the second prince, but he put on a polite face and resigned himself to entertaining the princesses until it was time for him to get ready for dinner. While Alex was busy in the garden, Dominic followed the princess into the bathing room. He untied the laces on her dress, the same as he did every evening, and was about to leave when the princess's voice stopped him. Did you know that there is a custom among the paladins of the royal order? If someone of the opposite gender sees you bare, you should marry them immediately to maintain your chaste status. She whispered. Dominic turned around to see what she was talking about, just in time to see her dress puddle on the floor at her feet as Princess Alexis turned around. Perfect. Utterly perfect. Dominic muttered, mostly to himself, as he absorbed the sight in front of his eyes. The princess' body was flawlessly toned, with far more muscle definition than he had expected on a noble lady, and crisscrossed with tiny scars from training and battles. Dominic remained frozen in place as she took one step forward, then grabbed his horn to pull his head down to her level. Her eyes fluttered closed as Princess Alexis pulled Dominic into a gentle kiss on the lips, then she turned him around by the horn and kicked him in the backside. Now out, so I can get ready. If they sent a chambermaid, send her in. She insisted, while Dominic tried to gather his wits. Of course, princess. Call if you need anything. The maids giggled to themselves when they came in and found the royal advisor standing in the middle of the room, staring off into space with a silly grin on his face. He's down bad. The princess is a lucky lady to have found a man so devoted. One of them whispered, breaking Dominic from his reverie. Ah, wonderful timing. Her Highness is preparing for the meeting in the bathing room and has requested assistance, as we didn't travel with any servants. Dominic greeted them. Of course, advisor. Will you be requiring a manservant as well? The dress code is royal formal, no armor or visible weapons. The maid replied. I will be fine, but please leave shaving supplies and scissors. Dominic requested. The maid bowed. We will call for a barber to come to you. There are a few on staff for last-minute hair issues. Excellent. His hair was getting too long to stay where he put it after bathing. By the time that Dominic was showered and changed, the barber was waiting for him, along with one other young man in livery Dominic didn't recognize. Might I ask who this is? He inquired, going for a polite tone. The observer from Mitfield, Lord Sorcerer. Given the recent instability in Dagos, it was deemed unwise to allow their attendants to serve foreign royalty in private. The young man replied in a grave tone. The barber sighed and nodded. One of the staff tried to poison a guest. Rest assured, such a thing will not be allowed to happen again. Dominic chuckled. There's been a lot of that going around, as well as attacks by staff hired out of Dagos years ago. Signia has put much effort into weeding out traitors since the war began. But if the barber was going to give him a trim and a shave, that meant having both scissors and a razor around his head, and Dominic could see why that would be an assassination risk. Midfield was generally considered to be on Signia's side in the conflict, though they had not committed to sending any troops north to reinforce Signia's nobles. So, Dominic settled into the chair to get his hair done, and tried to hide his amusement as the observer glared at the barber. The position of barber was considered a high-trust job for any nobleman, as the barber would routinely have a razor to your neck, and that wasn't a position that you would let a man you couldn't trust have. Within minutes, Dominic looked like a proper nobleman, freshly trimmed and shaved, and the barber was hurried off to take care of another client. The maids brought Princess Alexis out a few minutes later, looking radiant in a deep purple gown with silver flowers embroidered along the length to emphasize her curves. That had to be custom-tailored for her, as the embroidery fit her curves so well, and Dominic began to wonder just how much clothing she had to carry in her storage items. "Is everyone ready?" she asked, looking around and not finding her brother. "The second prince is in the courtyard, entertaining the princesses of Bostoveria, I believe," Dominic explained. Princess Alexis laughed. "I should have expected that. With 3 other suites facing the courtyard, there would be at least 1 or 2 eligible young nobles or royals in the area. Being famous has its downsides." The prince came back in a few minutes later, looking exhausted and smelling like perfume. Alexis giggled and winked at him. "You big softy, you never did have the heart to tell them off and make them cry. Now, should we head for dinner? It's a bit early still, but we shouldn't be the first ones in the room." Prince Alex turned to the maids, who bowed politely. "Your Highness, the junior nobles are already assembled. You would be the first royals in attendance." The prince nodded once. "Then let's get going. If they're going to plot, they can do it with us in the room." Chapter 192. Well, that's just rude. The herald at the door to the Great Hall froze in shock for a moment when the Signia delegation appeared a full 15 minutes earlier than they were expected. Announcing the second prince of Signia, Archmage Alex Cygnus, the Kingslayer. Announcing the 9th princess of Signia, Alexis Cygnus. Then he paused. Announcing the Signia royal advisor, Lord Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates, the Butcher of Westover. Dominic smiled, and the Dago's nobles flinched. "They're not going to let that go. You must have really gotten under their skin," Prince Alex whispered. Dominic shook his head. "At least they're nice to you." Alexis rolled her eyes. "What was the point of trying to disguise you if they were going to just announce your name when we entered the room? But you're right. They really are holding a grudge over a battle from 10 years ago. It seems a bit extreme, don't you think? Keep your guard up. They must be planning to use that status against you during the upcoming meetings, or perhaps even as an excuse to try to expel you from the meetings and demand your exile." Prince Alex turned to whisper to the pair, who were lowering their voices, but not particularly concerned about being overheard. "Just let it slide. They've been playing up the danger of the Dragon King's lineage for a decade to justify their actions. If they suddenly started welcoming him now, everyone would wonder what was going on and accuse the staff of being traitors." Dominic heard the muttering, shrugged, and then removed his hat to shake out his hair. "If we're not being subtle, then I might as well be comfortable. Your Highness, would you like a beverage?" Dominic asked, while gesturing for a server to come over with drinks. Out of habit, Dominic cast Quality Kibble, his food and drink purification spell, over the tray as the server approached, and noticed that every one of the drinks flashed a different color. "Wow, we really are popular." Prince Alex chuckled as he cast a spell of his own. The server was sweating heavily as they approached, unaware of the fact that the 2 mages had both cleansed the poisons from the drinks on the tray. "I should refrain from drinking." Princess Alexis declined, and Dominic realized that only he saw the lights as the toxins were identified and removed from the drinks. Dominic took a glass of champagne, toasted the room, and then downed half the glass before taking a second sip to savor the taste. "That's actually quite good. It's got a bit of a spicy aftertaste. Was that an aphrodisiac? While I appreciate their effort, I'm hardly of an age to need such things." Dominic joked when he realized he could still taste the neutralized toxins in the drink. The gathered nobles simply stared at him. Did he notice that it was poisoned and then drink it anyhow? One of the Dago's nobles asked. "I swear he did. Maybe he took an antitoxin in advance? But how would he know what was going to be in it?" One of the others asked. Prince Alex smiled at Dominic and handed him another drink. What is this one? How good are your taste buds? Dominic sipped the drink and frowned. That one is sweet, not a great combination for champagne. Strange aftertaste. I don't know that one. A Dago's royal steward came over with a bucket and dumped the remainder of the drinks, then bowed parallel to the ground. Please accept our apologies, Your Highness. It is not the will of the crown that you should be harmed in any way. He insisted, raising his voice as a warning to the nobles during the last part. The steward had to wonder if these nobles had lost what few brain cells they once possessed. Attempting to kill the second prince, when there was an entire Signia army camped within artillery range of the palace? Forget that the attempt would most likely fail with the sorcerer and the princess, who had holy magic, standing next to him. Just attempting would be suicidal for everyone in the building. Announcing the 4th Prince of Bostoveria, Nathan Bostover. Announcing the 10th Princess of Bostoveria. Announcing the 11th Princess of Bostoveria. Announcing the 12th Princess of Bostoveria. The herald at the door declared, breaking the tension. The 3 princesses were an instant attraction for all of the single nobles in the room, and the attention was drawn away from the spectacle of the Signia delegation taunting the Dago's nobles by deliberately drinking poisoned beverages. With 2 groups of royals already in attendance, the rest of the nobles rushed to attend, leaving only 2 guests conspicuously absent. The next to enter was Viscount Boscombe, with Prince Kaizen right behind him, looking frustrated. The Viscount stopped at the top of the stairs with an older noble at his left shoulder and Prince Kaizen on his right. The man that Dominic didn't know was the first to speak. Welcome to Albrol's, everyone. I know that I am new to the position and many of you are not familiar faces to me, but I am the new Duke Albrol's. We have gathered you all for the coronation of the new King of Dagos, but as you may have gathered, that point is in some contention at the moment. However, we anticipate that the situation will be resolved before the official coronation ceremony begins, so please eat, drink, and enjoy your time in Albrol's castle. It didn't escape anyone's notice that the Signia delegation, as small as it was with only 3 members, didn't touch any more of the beverages or appetizers before the dinner started. That stopped a number of the other nobles from indulging, as they were afraid of being the victim of an attack not meant for them, and the atmosphere in the room was becoming increasingly tense. The man who had dumped all the drinks from the tray that Dominic had first sampled from made his way to the Duke to give a report, which clearly didn't go over well, if the hushed shouting and the way that the Duke pinched the bridge of his nose were anything to go by. Whatever the man had found was so bad that the Duke actually looked visibly relieved when the signal was given to head to the tables for the formal dinner. Chapter 193. Mixed Seating. That optimism might have been misplaced, Dominic realized once they were seated. The delegations were mixed between small round tables, intended for members of royal families to socialize freely during the dinner. However, the person who made the guest seating chart had either used outdated political alliances as their guide, or had done them strictly by national power rankings. So, the second prince was seated at a table with Viscount Boscombe, the 4th Prince of Bostoveria and the Crown Prince of Skipple, plus a few nobles that Dominic didn't recognize. Whereas he was seated at a table with Princess Alexis and named as her fiancé on the place cards, while Prince Kaizen glared at them from the next table over, and the group of Dagos generals and advisors at their table looked increasingly nervous. Well, at the very least, we got the table with the best conversation. I can't imagine how stuffy and fake some of the other tables are right now. Princess Alexis muttered. The general on her left smiled. You speak the truth, Princess. I am General Widgeon, son of Count Widgeon, from the far north of Dagos. These are the advisor Albrol's, General Modberry, and their wives. As they were introduced, everyone gave the princess a polite smile. If you didn't already know, I am the 9th Princess of Signia, Alexis Cygnus. This is Royal Advisor and Lord Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates. She replied. Lady Modberry smiled at Dominic. It's a pleasure to meet you, Advisor. I must say that when I heard of your fearsome reputation, I thought that at the very least, you would be a senior from the 2nd Prince's Battle Mage Corps. I was not expecting a young bachelor. The general coughed, and his wife winked at him.
What?
We both know that it's unlikely our Waverly is going to remarry higher than a concubine. The sorcerer is a wonderful choice. I can't imagine that anyone would dare to bully her again if she were in his house. The woman, already far more tipsy than her polished appearance had let on, replied. Remarry? Dominic asked.
A war widow, sadly.
There are a lot of them to go around, and the pressure to take concubines to salvage the dignity of the widows will be strong once the succession is settled. General Widgeon explained. Princess Alexis nodded. I don't think that the succession will take long. There are many wise men in this room, and I am quite certain that they will see sense. Well, most of them. I will have someone look into who tried to poison us today. Perhaps a formal duel will remind them to behave. Behind them, Prince Kaizan scoffed. And what if the person you find is someone of rank? He asked, turning his chair to face the princess. Princess Alexis smiled serenely at him. I believe that recent events have proven that kings and barons both fall just as easily in a duel. Even if it is someone of higher rank, we won't shy away from holding them culpable for the attempted assassination of visiting dignitaries under a diplomatic flag. The four nobles at Prince Kaizan's table looked uneasy at the comment. The attempt on the Signia delegation was not exactly subtle after Dominic and Alex not only found, but loudly and publicly began to identify the poisons placed in multiple drinks on the tray brought to them. They hadn't taken any action yet, but it was only a matter of time before they did, and both men had reputations within Dagos which few would want to challenge. Prince Kaizan slammed his hands on the table. You think that you can just waltz in here and treat a Prince of Dagos any way that you please? Princess Alexis dabbed at her mouth with a napkin before answering. Prince Kaizan, might I remind you that we have more artillery deployed around the city than you have adult males left within the walls? It would behoove you to keep that temper of yours in check, and count yourself lucky that we have not deigned to stoop to your level. But don't think that we won't if it becomes necessary. Even if we have to eliminate 7 generations of the families of every Dagos noble that wishes to continue hostilities against Signia, we will. Prince Kaizan leapt to his feet, and Dominic stood to meet him, placing himself between the princess and the Dagos prince. Your Highness, if you value your good health, I recommend that you return to your dinner. Dominic insisted. The room was full of hushed murmurs as the Signia advisor openly insulted and threatened one of the leading candidates for next king of Dagos. I'm of half a mind to, the prince began. And if you were of more than half a mind, you would be sitting right now. Dominic retorted. 2 noblemen came running from another table and grabbed the prince by the shoulders to lead him out of the room before he could say anything that he couldn't take back. My apologies for the interruption. Please continue your dinner conversations. Dominic informed the room with a polite nod. Then he returned to his seat, where the Dagos generals sat silently, trying to decide just how serious the Dragonkin was about his challenge. In their minds, there had still been a real chance that the prince would win the popular support of the majority of the Dagos nobles and the throne. But with today's humiliation, many would turn on him. Followed by the revelation that Signia had huge amounts of artillery around the city, waiting to deploy, and it was becoming clear to even the most patriotic of generals that the war was already lost. The coronation was a mere formality to decide what the next generation looked like. General Widgeon sighed. The prince has always had a short temper, a keen mind, but the moment that he gets upset, that all goes out the window. Dominic nodded. He drew a blade in the Signia throne room as well. Only the king's mercy let him leave alive, but it seems he took that as a sign that he could do anything that he wanted. Both generals shook their heads in dismay. The prince had built a lot of support over the years, but now he was cracking under pressure. If they were going to make him king to keep the army in control of the nation, they were going to have to bring him back in line. Chapter 194. Meet the Generals. The main course came out, and the table ate in silence for a few minutes as the rest of the room buzzed with anxious conversation. So, what is Widgeon like? It's a large city, isn't it? Dominic asked, trying to salvage the conversation. General Widgeon nodded. 250,000 now, with a fishing fleet of nearly 5,000 ships. We're leaders in Magitech shipbuilding as well. The whole city has been changing ever since the new steam-assisted ships were introduced. Keeping enough coal on board to drive the boiler has been difficult, but Dagos doesn't have the number of mages that Signia or Bostoveria do. General Modberry nodded. We had recently changed from building conventional ships to building airships in my hometown, though it is currently under siege. The adaptation to new designs and technologies has been a real boon for industry. Tell me, how does Signia handle the shortage of copper? Princess Alexis sighed. Not well, I'm afraid. We've instituted large recycling programs, developed new mining tools to extend the lives of the few copper mines that we have, and we have been working on trade deals to import more. General Widgeon tapped at the table. If the situation was different, I would offer to have our merchant fleet bring you more copper, for a moderate commission, of course. However, with the battle of the two heirs, I don't see a way that the struggle for the throne is going to end with anything resembling normal trade relations. Dominic shrugged. Well, I suppose if things get bad enough, another option can be found. You never know where there might be another Dagos royal hiding in plain sight. But I do have some hope for the Viscount. He has proven to be a pragmatic leader in the past. Not like some who would throw their entire army away for a slim hope of victory. That clear dig at Prince Kaizan didn't go unmissed by any of the nobles who were listening carefully from the nearby tables. Those who were familiar with the lineage knew that the Signia crown prince's wife was a princess, but accepting him as their monarch would be a last resort, and only after a civil war. However, Advisor Dominic's words suggested that there was another royal alive that they had all forgotten about. Or perhaps they had been lied to. If one of the other princes was still alive, it would throw the whole succession into chaos. They didn't know it yet, but there were actually two of them still alive, and willing to support Signia's crown Prince Claudius for the throne of Dagos if it became necessary. They had no intention of taking over where their grandfather had left off, but they also weren't willing to support Kaizan. While the Dagos generals and advisors were unaware that the two princes were alive, Dominic was unaware that Kaizan had told everyone that they were dead so that he could recruit support for his faction. If support was split 4 ways, Viscount Boscom would be forced onto the throne, whether he wanted it or not. Prince Kaizan looked like he was ready to explode as he returned to his seat. But when the servers brought the next course, his glare turned to a smirk. Like that wasn't suspicious at all. The servers weren't wearing the same white gloves as the rest of the staff. The ones that they had on looked like some sort of magitech, and when they put down the plates, they immediately retreated. General Modberry instantly rose to his feet. Seriously? Twice in one night. Are you trying to start the siege of Albrols tonight with your idiocy? I, General Modberry, heir to the dukedom of Modberry, hereby demand that Prince Kaizan be removed from consideration for the throne and stripped of all noble status for the attempted murder of visiting dignitaries. The prince leapt to his feet, about to speak, and the sound of blades being drawn filled the room.
Attack.
The prince declared. The staff and guards began attacking indiscriminately, aiming for every noble in the room. The generals all drew weapons and moved to surround the princess and their wives in a defensive formation, so Dominic crossed his fingers for luck as he cast mage armor on the 3 of them. With a thought, Arcane Blast took out a guard as he charged for the generals, but when Dominic turned to where Prince Kaizan should be, the man was gone. Not moved off to attack someone, simply vanished. Mimic spell. He was never really here. Viscount Boscom shouted. His blade was in his hand, and covered in clay, as he must have stabbed the fake Prince Kaizan in the back. More soldiers were pouring into the dining room as the guests drew weapons from their storage items and tried to fight back. Now we know why that bastard was so smug. The coward abandoned his people to have mercenaries do his dirty work. Someone from the prince's table shouted. Everyone retreat to defensive formations, center of the room. Prince Alex called. The nobles who couldn't fight immediately retreated, and Prince Alex raised a defensive barrier over them. That would prevent hidden archers from targeting them. But going by the number of soldiers entering the room, Dominic didn't think that subtlety was the order of the day. Princess, please retreat to safety with the generals' wives. Dominic requested. Alexis was going to argue, but she didn't have any of her spell gems on or armor. By the time that she was equipped for battle, the fight would be over. But Dominic didn't suffer from that limitation, and he hurled a fireball at the main doors of the Great Hall, scorching dozens of soldiers. He smacked a mortar round on his horn, lighting the fuse, then threw it at the upper balcony, where more mercenaries were entering, and then frowned as the blast shattered all the stained glass windows in the room. That was a powerful detonation in an enclosed space. He would have to remember that for later. Arcane Blast rescued a downed nobleman from Chip, and then one of the princesses from Bostoveria, who had been separated from her family. The second prince was casting some sort of grand magic from the center of the room, but Dominic ignored it as he continued to target every mercenary, traitor staff member, and hostile guard in the room. It looked like they had started the attack by assassinating the guards arranged along the walls by the other nation's nobles, and there wasn't much resistance, other than a few well-trained swordsmen, like the generals. Then, the second prince's magic washed over the room in a wave, and every one of the intruders collapsed, bleeding from the eyes and nose. Chapter 195. Head Count. Your Highness. Dominic called. I'm good. Viscount Boscombe is safe. Alexis replied. There were bodies all over the room, and far too many of them in finery. The murder of dozens of foreign royals and higher nobles would not go over well, and Dominic didn't know what was going to happen now. Would they place the blame all on Prince Kaizen? Would they join the war against Dagos? Realistically, the majority of the country didn't have anything worth taking, and it would cost them more than they would get back. But would any of them be willing to support Viscount Boscombe? If he couldn't provide effective security for formal events, could he be trusted as a monarch? But there might be more happening in the city than they knew about. Princess Alexis moved between the bodies, healing those who were still breathing, as did a few other noble ladies who had chosen the path of a priestess. It didn't appear that there were any other paladins in the room, but they were uncommon outside Signia. Haggard-looking royal guards ran in a few minutes later, both survivors of the detachment sent by other nations and the Dagos royal guard members who had been stationed elsewhere in the castle. General, the threat appears to be neutralized. There is no sign of Kaizen in his quarters or anywhere else in the palace. However, the Signia army has sent a cavalry regiment into the city. A guard general announced. Prince Alex frowned and shook his head. There hasn't been any action within the city, and nobody has attempted to leave. If he was in the palace, he should still be here somewhere. The Viscount and the new Duke Albrols shared a grim look. I think that I know where he has gone. Beneath us, there is an ancient dungeon and escape tunnel system, in case the city and the palace were besieged. The Duke has already dispatched soldiers to the exit, and we will send another to hunt him down from this side. Viscount Boscombe declared. The second prince nodded. I will join the team. Prince Nathan of Chip will join me, as he is also an accomplished battle mage. Even if the coward has a small army with him, we will take care of it. Now lead the way, there is no time to waste. Sister, stay here with the others. I won't be long. The young Duke of Albrols led the two mages out of the room, and a group of his guards formed behind them, running through the halls. Viscount Boscombe gave the princess a tired smile and ran a hand through his graying hair. I thought that he was seriously going to contend for the throne, not attempt to murder everyone who might support me instead. But I do believe that we can take this as a sign of his abdication and move ahead with the coronation ceremony. The sooner that we can do it and get the other nations to recognize it, the better. He decided. Dominic nodded in understanding, but the princess frowned. The prince's actions were like a small child throwing a tantrum. He had realized that he couldn't have the throne, and now he was trying to burn everything to the ground so that nobody else could have it either. That was not the logic of someone who was considered a contender for the throne, even as a puppet king. There might be another party involved, making him look worse than he was. Alexis addressed the Viscount in a quiet tone. I think that might not be as easy as you hoped, with the number of dead here today. We all know what happened, but how many of the monarchs sitting at home are going to believe the official story when you have to tell them that their children and senior nobles were killed at the first dinner of the succession gathering? Until Prince Kaizen is found and publicly shamed into a confession, your position is shaky. Worse, I am not certain that even my father will believe the official reports. If he doesn't, then the ceasefire is going to end in the most violent way possible, and those nobles who are gathered here to support you will likely be forced home to defend their cities. Boscombe nodded stiffly. You have a good point, Princess. I should be working on assuring everyone that we're working to assure their safety. However, with most of the army under the control of Prince Kaizan, that might not be easily done. He was about to turn away when a thought came to him. Might we hire your natural sons' regiment for security, Princess Alexis? As the sons of noblemen, they may be familiar faces to the guests, and at the very least, their loyalties will not be in question. Alexis took a moment to consider the wisdom of that, then nodded. I will make an announcement to the room now, and then call for the regiment to come inside the palace and secure the area while Dagos works to identify the rest of the assassins. After all, they were already on their way in, and her communication gem was flashing constantly as the drivers sent messages to the regiment, who were already in the city. The head table, which had been left empty for the dinner, as no monarch was chosen yet, was on a raised stage at the front of the room, putting the king and his invited guests above the rest of the nobles, in both a literal and a metaphorical sense. Normally, the duke would dine there, but in this situation, it had been deemed best not to, as he had no aspirations to the throne. Dominic led Princess Alexis to the stage, then whistled to stop all the nervous chatter. Princess Alexis curtsied politely and addressed the nobles. After today's incident, the heir apparent to the throne of Dagos has requested the assistance of Signia to ensure the safety of his guests. For this purpose, the 500 soldiers of the Natural Sons Regiment will be entering the city to secure the palace. They will not be interfering in the political affairs of Dagos beyond security measures, but those who have lost their security retinue may request a personal guard from the Natural Sons. Rest assured, every man in the regiment is noble-born, suitable to the role as a personal guard even for royalty. We do not wish to fully occupy the city at this time, so the majority of the army will remain on station outside the city limits. I will personally assist with the funeral arrangements for those who fell here today, as I travel with a number of spare storage devices, so bodies may be preserved if funeral rites will be performed at home. Prince Nathan of Chip and Prince Alex of Signia are hunting the coward prince who orchestrated the attacks today, and it is Signia's wish that everyone considers staying while the succession of Dagos is sorted. The questionable legitimacy of the Dagos king is not in our interest, she explained. Chapter 196. Unclear Path Forward. The nobles were unsure of their path forward, but the Signia princess had saved many lives after the battle. If she had a full regiment of noblemen to secure the Albrol's palace, it would be seen as a capitulation by the Dagos throne. But most considered the war to be lost already, and the succession to be a concession by Signia to avoid angering their other neighbors with an attempt to expand their own holdings by too much. A man in white robes joined them on the stage. Who do we have here that can use mana at the level 15 or higher flow rate? There is an archpriest in the city, and he has just arrived to perform a revitalization ritual. It's not quite resurrection, but if there is any chance of saving a life, he will be able to heal them with enough mana. Princess Alexis nodded and gestured to Dominic. Both of us are capable. The second prince is as well, but he is indisposed at the moment, hunting the perpetrator of today's attack. A few other nobles came forward, including all of the Bastoveria royals. This will have to do. Generally, revitalization will work within 30 minutes of death, but it takes a massive amount of mana to restart their bodily functions, and there are no guarantees. Especially if the body is too damaged. The priest explained. Everyone in the room already knew that, but it was good to hear it, so they didn't get their hopes too high. The priest came running into the room with a dozen other elderly clergy members, and then motioned for tables to be moved. The ritual requires a spell circle on the ground. Do any of you speak the ancient mystic languages? I don't have my usual proofreader with me. The old man wheezed, trying to catch his breath. I can read and write most of the ancient runic languages, elder. Go ahead and work. I will check the runes and grammar for you. Dominic insisted. The priest looked dubious, but when Dominic took off his hat, the old man smiled and nodded. The priest began drawing the magical circle, while Dominic watched and whispered a few changes to him to make the spell more efficient on a large group. They only wanted to target the ones who were still in this room, which was easy. They just needed to remove the bodies of the mercenaries, so they didn't revive enemies in the process. Are we ready? The elderly priest asked as he finished drawing the circle. We have removed the attackers. The recently deceased are bandaged as well as possible to make the spell easier. His assistant informed him. All right, everyone, pass me mana, and I will begin the spell. All of the magically adept nobles began to send mana to the priest, and the spell's circle glowed bright white, a light that spread across the room. The priest was panting with exertion, but the spell was still getting stronger. Sorcerer, put as much mana as you can directly into the spell. It is stable enough now. He mumbled, struggling to hold the spell together. Dominic changed his focus to pulling as much mana as he could from the palace and feeding it to the spell circle. The white light went from bright to blinding, and then so bright that Dominic could see the veins in his eyelids after he shut them against the light. Then, the bones in his hand when he covered his eyes instead. Then, the light abruptly faded, leaving them all temporarily blinded. It worked, Princess Alexis declared, and Dominic wondered how she knew that. He couldn't see anything. As his vision cleared, he saw that the same was true of nearly everyone else, but the princess had pressed a folded piece of leather over her eyes, dimming the light enough that when it faded, she wasn't totally blind. Not all of the nobles were moving, but most of the deceased were beginning to move, and over half of the guards who had been the first casualties. That was better than Dominic had expected. He hadn't seen many high-leveled clerics in action, but this one certainly had lived up to every hope that an outsider could have for them. In theory, resurrection was also possible, but it was more akin to necromancy, and you never knew if you'd get the person back intact, or as some sort of soulless undead. Revitalization didn't have that problem. The fallen nobles' friends and relatives swarmed to them, ensuring that they were properly healed and not likely to die again in a few minutes. But the spell had done its job properly, and no open wounds were found on the living. Well, at least we won't be sending dozens of condolence letters back to every king we share a border with. Dominic heard the Albrol's Duke's chief advisor mutter. That was one way of looking at it. But also, having them all alive to tell the story of how Prince Kaizan's mercenaries turned on them would go a long way to quelling the rage of the foreign royals over this incident. What would really matter is whether the prince could be captured alive, and how Viscount Boscombe handled things in the next few days while they rushed his coronation ceremony. Thank you, High Priest. You saved so many of our people. One of the Bostovirian princesses cried, hanging off the old man's sleeve. The old man looked at Dominic, intending to place the blame on him, but the sorcerer was looking away with his arm around the Princess of Signia. That route was out. You're welcome, Princess. But it's no more than my duty, and every magic user in the room assisted. He replied instead. But you're the only one who knows the ancient language and the healing spell. Without you, none of this would be possible. Surely, there is some reward that we can offer you. She pleaded. Princess, my order takes vows of both poverty and chastity. There really aren't any worldly desires that will tempt us. The high priest assured her, while the nearby nobles tried not to laugh. She had not meant it in a physical way at all. She was just so used to flirting with potential suitors that she did it unconsciously. Chapter 197. Search the Palace. Deep beneath the Albrol's palace, Prince Alex and Prince Nathan of Chip moved carefully through a dim corridor. They had reached the deepest level of the dungeons, and soon they would be headed for the emergency exit tunnel that would lead out of the city in case of siege. It was assumed that the prince knew of the location and how to access it, but so far, neither mage had found any signs of recent usage, nor any sign of the prince's presence in the palace at all. It was possible that they were chasing a ghost, and that the duplicate that Viscount Boscombe had destroyed was the only version of Prince Kaizan that had ever been in the Albrol's palace. Which brought up one very serious question. Where was the real Prince Kaizan, and who had created the duplicate of him? Because that was well beyond the magical abilities of the Dago's royal line. The pair of princes searched every corner of the palace, even going room to room, using a finding spell, in case Kaizan was trying to hide from them. But they didn't find anything except a group of terrified servants and one confused advisor. He had, understandably, skipped the dinner where his prince was planning to assassinate everyone who would stand against his bid to become king. But even under intense questioning, he gave no signs that he knew that the Prince Kaizan here was a fake. In the Great Hall, Everyone was on edge, and they were all waiting for the two princes to return or send word of their findings. The level of trust was too low for them to approve sending out any more groups who might alert more traitors or pass messages to forces hiding in the city. The feast was reluctantly continued once the tables were reset, but more out of the necessity of eating something than any desire to actually continue with the day's planned schedule. Prince Alex led the investigation group back into the hall hours later, long after dark. Half the nobles were already asleep in their chairs or leaning against walls, but everyone had remained where they were, save for the staff who disposed of the bodies. And the kitchen staff, who still looked absolutely terrified. They weren't stupid. Half of the staff hired for the event had joined the attack launched by Prince Kaizan, and the other half would be lucky to leave with their lives. Even leaving with all their limbs mostly intact would be considered a win. Princess Alexis slowly chewed a puff pastry with a contemplative look on her face. Do you think that the version of Prince Kaizan, who was insignia, was the same duplicate? It would explain why he wasn't afraid of death. He may have been taunting us, pushing his luck to see if anyone realized that it was a body double. She pondered. Dominic and the generals frowned. That's not impossible. The spell links the fake to the real version, so it can react properly. But it knows that it is not the real person. Given his twisted personality, I can see a fake Kaizan doing something like that. General Widgeon agreed. Then the question becomes whether the real prince knows everything that the double has done. And if so, how did he plan to make that work in his favor? Dominic wondered. Or if he's the one making the plans at all. General Maudberry added. That was a disturbing possibility. The real prince may be in captivity somewhere, with his double sent out to cause trouble and destabilize two nations at the same time. But until they could find the real prince, or the mage who created the double, they couldn't prove any of their theories. The princes finished speaking to a few other royals, then Prince Alex came to the table to collect his sister. Alexis, we should retire to our suite for the evening. Nothing else will get done tonight, but we will need to be sharp in the morning. The regiment has just finished securing the palace, and the commander will be waiting at our suite for a briefing on his duties. He explained. Dominic helped the princess to her feet, and Alexis smiled at her brother. All right, let's get this all over with. Now that the natural sons are in place, there is less to worry about. They're armed heavily enough for anything short of a full paratrooper invasion of the city. Technically, they were armed to deal with that as well, Dominic knew. But hitting moving targets from that great of a distance was pushing the limits of the rifles. He really did have to revise the plans to create a reliable sniper rifle of some sort, preferably with a longer range than what any of the other nations could achieve with artillery. That might not be practical simply because of ballistics, but where ballistics failed them, magic might be able to step in. Dominic just didn't know exactly how to accomplish that. You've got a faraway look in your eyes, like you're planning a war crime. Prince Alex joked. Dominic shrugged. I was working on mental plans for how to alter the regiment's Magitech rifles into something with enough range and accuracy to snipe artillery before it can get in range to fire. The Dago's generals shared concerned looks at that revelation. The world was a better place without that particular invention. What sort of demonic sorcery would allow a rifle to fire further than artillery? Surely, that wasn't something that could be done?
It was.
But mostly it was accomplished with a collection of Magitech orbs and spell gems, not a single device. Already, Commander Dax had a confirmed kill from over a kilometer away, even though it had taken him multiple shots. With some improvement, it wasn't unrealistic to at least hit a stationary vehicle from over a kilometer away every time. From there, refinements could be made to narrow the target to the size of a human. Not that either of those things would have helped them today. Chapter 198. Regimental Duties. Prince Alex led them back to their suite, where Commander Dax was waiting, along with his adjutant and 2 runners from the regiment. Your Highnesses. Advisor. What are your orders? Commander Dax greeted them. First, what is going on in the city? Has there been any sign of a troop buildup? Any mass movement of citizens that might indicate trouble? Prince Alex asked. That's the tricky part, you see. The people are expecting that there's going to be a new king any day now, so they're congregating around the palace, waiting for the official announcement. Everyone knows that the candidates are here and not at one of the other royal palaces, so this is the spot to find out first. They're not going to easily give up on the best spots to wait for the announcements, and they've crowded some of the streets so badly that the merchants are having a tough time getting to work. Fortunately, the windows that were blown out all face internal courtyards and weren't visible to any of the civilians outside the palace. Dax explained. The prince sighed and shook his head. Of course they are gathered here. Why didn't I think of that? Well, to update your end, Prince Kaizan was a magical double, and we don't know who made it. It's extremely complex ritual magic, so that narrows down the number of people who could have possibly assisted him. We also know that the real Kaizan is still alive somewhere. If he had died, the spell would have ended. Now, how is the regiment armed? Commander Dax rubbed at the back of his neck nervously. Well, you see, we're fairly well stocked. We've got a rifle and a mana revolver, a shoulder-fired mortar launcher with 20 rounds, and an uncommon grade sword for every man. Every 10th man has a ground-fired mortar for artillery emplacements, but the rounds are interchangeable between launchers, so we can overstock them from the rest of the unit if we're in a siege. Advisor Dominic, myself, and 2 team leaders have the Magitech orbs to make more mortar rounds. We have enough food supplies for 4 months and water creation orbs. The rum stock is low, as we were using it to make friends among the locals for information gathering. Other than that, we've got no damages among the mechanical horses, and all transport trucks, including the passenger transport, are in operational condition. All are magic-driven, so no concerns on fuel range. Dax explained. The prince nodded, then once the commander was finished, he turned to Dominic. And when exactly did you find time to make mortar launchers? The first night after we left Signia City. They're brilliant. We didn't have any cannons with us, but we wanted something with more crowd suppression ability than the rifles. The first test was a resounding success, and then the lads suggested it might be nice to be able to fire mortars while on the move. If we had real horses, they would have never adapted to the new tactic, but with everyone on mechanical steeds, it has proven exceptionally effective as a ride-by strike. Like horse archers, but explosive. Dominic explained. I will get you to make me one later. The important part for now is that the city is likely to come under attack in the next few days, and we don't know whether the attack is coming from inside or outside the city. If it's outside, the armies can take care of it. If it's from inside, we will need the natural sons to be at peak form. There is a chance that with the initial plan failed, Prince Kaizan and his backers are going to make another attempt to assassinate Viscount Boscom before he can be crowned. I will push for the timeline to be accelerated, but some preparations will be needed. At best, we're looking at the day after tomorrow. Prince Alex explained. Commander Dax nodded. All right, we can handle that. Then, once there is a crown on his head, what comes next? Alexis gave a grim chuckle. That's when the real danger starts. Once there is a king to deal with, we need to work out either an end to the war, terms of surrender by Dagos, or the full invasion of the remaining free cities. The commander frowned, and the other soldiers shrugged. Most of that wasn't their problem, unless it came to a battle within the city. The political machinations would be done by the senior nobles, not untitled soldiers like them. Though this gathering was particularly lucrative. There were more Dagos noble families scheduled to arrive soon, and they might have daughters with them. The natural sons were mostly unmarried, as a married man didn't volunteer to join the front lines of a war. The ladies might be from an enemy nation now, but that could soon change. Prince Alex cleared his throat. All right, I have a deployment order for you. I managed to obtain a more complete map of the palace, and the regiment will be sending soldiers to accompany the foreign nobles who lost too many guards. Your regiment will be everywhere within the palace by tomorrow night. Make copies of the map for the unit so that they all know where to go if there is an alarm call. We've got multiple requests already, and the palace guard, or what is left of them, will be sending the rest of the requests to you directly. Commander Dax smiled. All right, I will take care of it. You do whatever it is that royals do at these sorts of functions. Hunt traitors, pretend that I actually like the royal brats from the other nations, wait for the next idiot to try to assassinate me, keep my sister from getting drunk enough to be taken advantage of. Prince Alex agreed. The other officers chuckled, and Commander Dax shrugged. I don't think that you have to worry about that. If someone wants to get to her, They have to get past both you and advisor Dominic. And then they can deal with the princess herself. Let me tell you, if the royal guardsmen are to be trusted, she only gets more violent when drunk. Princess Alexis smirked, and her brother rolled his eyes. The commander wasn't wrong. She had a habit of getting into bar fights when patrons at the tavern the guard frequented didn't recognize her and got a bit too handsy. Chapter 199, Occupation. The commander led the men out to deploy the soldiers, while Prince Alex poured a round of drinks. We're going to need this, and then you should get a good night's sleep. I will be up all night dealing with military deployment orders, so you two can take care of the polite politics tomorrow morning. The prince instructed. Are you not calling your advisor up? Dominic asked. Prince Alex shook his head. He is watching over the 2nd Regiment for me, and he's got a communication device to send me messages about what happens outside the city. It's critical that he remains where he is. Alexis and Dominic finished their drinks, then the princess dragged him to his feet as Prince Alex cleared his throat. There are servants here, sister. They can help you prepare for bed. Alexis sighed, then motioned for one of the blushing and quietly giggling maids to join her. You two are going to give my father a heart attack when he reads the reports, you know that, don't you? Prince Alex sighed. His hair was tousled from running his fingers through it, and dark bags were already beginning to form under his eyes. The events of the day hadn't been easy on him, but he was planning to stay up all night to sort out the military deployments anyhow. It's not our intention. We just got into the habit as we were traveling, and it's become routine. Dominic replied.
Sit and drink.
The maids will gossip enough already. Since we have a bit of time, we should discuss a few important matters about your courtship. Alex insisted. Miss, we will need the good stuff for this. Perhaps a nice cognac. Dominic instructed the maid as he sat across from the prince. There are a few things that are unclear about your childhood. You were raised by an arcanist and a technomage, right? One of them being the younger sibling of the Earl Westover? Prince Alex asked. Dominic nodded. They preferred peace and quiet, so we didn't live in the manor, but a few kilometers out in the woods. The prince pursed his lips and frowned. How sure are you that they're your real parents? Dominic shrugged. As sure as any child would be. I lived in that house for as long as I can remember. We went to visit the manor once or twice a week, but there weren't any other children my exact age there. The closest was a season off. Most children in the village were born in the autumn. You see, the result of long nights spent indoors during the heavy rains of winter. Prince Alex nodded. The reason I ask is right there on your head. I managed to dig up pictures of the Earl's family from just after he moved to Westover Manor. He was good friends with the Baron Westover from the Signia side of the border, you see. And none of the rest of the family had such prominent draconic lineage. Not even the Earl's sister, the Dragon King's exiled former concubine. She would have arrived in the manor 6 months before you were born. The prince paused there, and Dominic silently considered the implications. The Earl's sister was exiled in disgrace for reasons that were never openly stated around children. But Prince Alex was right. Though most of the family and the villagers were dragonkin, horns were rare. At most, it usually manifested in the pupil shape, sometimes the fingernails growing as claws. And the magical affinity, of course. But Dominic had all those traits and more. But his parents were his parents, no matter what the truth was. However, if his lineage pointed more directly toward the Dragon King, there could be ramifications far beyond his magical abilities. Dagos and their allies had gone to great extents to eliminate the Dragon King's entire direct lineage. Letting a surviving member marry into the Signia royal family would surely upset those who had a particular grudge against the deceased king. Dominic nodded slowly as he considered his answer. Yes, she arrived half a year before I was born. However, I am told that exiled concubines are given a potion to ensure that they are not pregnant when they are exiled. Even if her child were fostered out to someone in the village or another family member, it would be incredibly difficult to convince others of that fact. Prince Alex shook his head. And I wouldn't want to. My concern is that if your lineage led a bit more directly to the dragons than others thought, we might end up with a new young dragon king looking to claim his throne in the next generation. What do you know about your father? Where was he born? What was his father like? I have no records on his side of the family, unlike your mother's. Dominic shrugged. He was a technomage, and I am told that he was traveling when he met my mother at the market selling her magical wares. If you left them alone, they would discuss nothing but magical devices in the sort of intensely flirtatious way that makes young children leave the room in disgust. Prince Alex laughed so hard that tears formed in his eyes. Did this man honestly not see that he did the same thing with Princess Alexis? Going by the innocent look on his face, he really might not have noticed how intimate their conversations had gotten. Just the fact that she was physically touching him as she read was enough to scandalize half the court. If they knew she napped in his lap alone, the king himself would hold the shotgun for the next morning's forced wedding. That was why he hadn't said anything. Prince Claudius surely suspected at least a little of what was going on, though. What Prince Alex actually said did not give away any of his thoughts on the matter. All right, then it is possible that your father had the greater draconic lineage. There are more than a few wild sorcerers and demi-humans who are more beast or monster than human. Your father was well respected for his work. I have the records from the border barons on the matter to confirm it. Some of his devices remain in the treasuries of Signia nobles to this day. Now, back to my original point. I think that we should hold a foreign wedding in the next few days so that we can assign titles and estates to you both as part of whatever settlement we come to. If we do it after, it will be problematic. Alex insisted. Dominic winked at him. I'm not going to be the one to tell the princess. That's all on you. Chapter 200. But will she agree? Prince Alex shrugged, unconcerned. I think that she will take it better than you're expecting. Just the fact that it will be over and done with, and she will get her first choice without any royal arguments should be enough. That was a solid argument. Princess Alexis hadn't been in any hurry to get married in the first place, but Dominic was more concerned that she might start a rebellion if her sister was forced into a political marriage in her place. Or worse, that she really did have the vision of a perfect wedding in her mind and had simply refused to tell anyone about it so they could prepare. The maid brought out a bottle of fine cognac and popped the cap to let it breathe for a moment before pouring. Oh, that is good. I don't know that I'll be able to go back to soldier rum after that. Dominic sighed as he sipped the strong liquor. I don't know how you drink that stuff in the first place. The only thing worse is the gin that they make. That stuff is just vile. Prince Alex replied, disgusted by the thought. Nearly as vile as pineapple. Alexis agreed as she walked out of her room with her hair down and wearing a dressing robe over her nightgown. She walked over to the table, and Dominic poured her a shot. The maid looked scandalized at the thought of a princess drinking hard liquor like a soldier. Even the maids didn't touch such things, much preferring wine. Have you two finished discussing my future without me? She asked, then sighed as she sipped the cognac. Almost. We would have gone into more details, but he is to be my brother-in-law, and some things wouldn't be appropriate. Dominic agreed. You two are incorrigible. Now, did he insist on an immediate wedding, or hedge around the topic? Alexis demanded, facing Dominic. The prince sighed. You know that I wouldn't do that. However, you would strongly encourage that it is done before the war ends? Princess Alexis guessed. See, no need to get upset. We're both thinking the same thing. Don't you mean all three of us? She retorted. No, just the two of us. What advisor Dominic is thinking definitely isn't suitable for polite company. But we did get a chance to chat a little about his lineage. Nothing definitive, but enough to confirm that none will contest his right to noble title. Prince Alex clarified. Dominic winked at the princess, who blushed, then stuck her tongue out at him and downed the rest of her drink so she could pour herself another. This time with an ice cube. At least the preparations will be easy. Dominic heard one of the noble son's guards at the door mutter to himself. How is that? Dominic asked. Well, she's a princess and a paladin of the order. The formal wedding ceremony is detailed down to the last movement. All we need to do is bring in the right people, and it can be prepared in a matter of hours. They've mastered the routine by now. The officer explained. Right, your father is also a royal paladin, isn't he? Princess Alexis asked. Yes, your highness. Currently deployed with the crown prince. Well, we shouldn't be short on witnesses. If we can get my royal guards here, we will have all the order members we need. Then we just need a priest, and one more male royal. Princess Alexis pondered. Prince Alex laughed. You underestimate my powers of preparation, little sister. My royal guards were in the airship, accompanying my ground troops. Plus, the other royal doesn't have to be a Signia royal. There are princes from West Kyria, Bostoveria, and Chip here. If we want to hold the ceremony, we only need a few hours to get everyone in place. However, I am certain that more time is needed on your side, and we probably shouldn't cause a spectacle until things are a bit more settled. We wouldn't want to ruin your honeymoon with a civil war or a succession battle. 400 kilometers northwest at the royal castle of Arenal, Prince Kaizan was in a rage. You said that it would work. What is this I'm hearing that not only did Viscount Boscombe survive, none of the titled foreign nobles attending his false coronation are dead either? Did I hire a mercenary army or a bunch of housewives bragging about their skill with a kitchen blade? He roared at the mercenary general kneeling in front of him. The man had been mercilessly whipped, with his back in tatters and bleeding onto the floor. Your Majesty, we weren't aware that the Wavemates Prince and the Signia Second Prince were at the ball. Their magical abilities were too great for our men to overcome, and then they managed to have that decrepit old high priest cast a revivification ritual on the dead. The mercenary pleaded. Prince Kaizan scoffed and turned to his loyal generals and nobles. Send out the messages. The new king of Dagos has taken the throne, and a coronation will be held here in 7 days. The traitor Viscount and his band of cowards at Albrols are to be executed on sight by any loyal son of Dagos. He demanded. Yes, your highness. Long live the king. His advisor agreed. Long live the king. The nobles in the room echoed. But there were no others there to hear them. The only ones who knew of this meeting were already in the room, and no foreign noble nor nation had shown any true loyalty to his body double in the time before the attack in Albrols. He had no use for cowards and traitors. Even if he had to rebuild the nation from the ground up, he could do it with just loyal citizens. Kaizan gestured harshly for the nobles to clear the room, then called his advisors forward. How are things in the north? Have we prepared the next phase in the plan? He asked, confident that they would return the answer he wanted. Yes, your majesty. The only nobles from north of Boscombe that are not with us are the Duke Modbury and General Widgeon. Those traitors are in Albrols, but Modbury is under siege by the Signia scum. They won't last long once the ceasefire ends. Kaizan gave a cruel smile. Excellent. Put the plan in motion. We don't want that bastard Boscombe alive by the time my coronation comes. And for the sake of your families, don't fail me again.